Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Greg Cochran. I'm the Executive Vice President at Pilko and Associates. Today, I'd like to welcome you to our Leadership Series video, and we're featuring Mr. Sam Smolik. Sam is an executive leader, has been an executive leader in the petrochemical and chemical industry for many years. He's also been a leader that I've reported to over my course of my career, and now I'm thrilled and pleased to say that he's a good friend of mine and a mentor. Sam has written a book. The book title is The Power of Goal Zero. And Sam is going to be talking more and more about his book and when it's coming out and how you can get it. Before we get to that point, though, Sam, please introduce yourself for our audience and tell us about your career.
Okay, Greg. Well, hey, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. My background, I retired from LyondellBasell in 2017. I was the Senior Vice President for Americas Manufacturing. Prior to that, I started my career with Dow Chemical. I spent 30 years there. That's where you and I worked together.
Yep.
I eventually became the Global Vice President for Environment, Health, Safety, Security, Sustainable Development, all those functions. I left Dow and got recruited to Shell. Did the same thing for the global downstream business. I ran all the global environment, health, and safety. And then when LyondellBasell went bankrupt in 2019, I got invited to join the company to bring it back out of bankruptcy. And so I ran not only global environment, health, and safety, but by that time, operational excellence. And that's really kind of the theme of the book as we get into it. So I've had a long career, and I'm ready to share my learnings.
So the question I would ask, Sam, to kind of start off, we're going to get into the details or the main themes that you'd like to cover in the book. But before you get into that, what gave you, or where did the idea come from to write a book in the first place? Give us a sense of how you got started.
Well, this is 2021. I'm celebrating 50 years having worked. I graduated from high school in, I hate to say it, but 1971.
Excellent.
Got a summer job in the industry and have worked ever since then. So, 50 years, you learn, you have life lessons that you learn along the way. And then you start to learn about companies and industries, eventually get into leadership positions, you get learnings. And so as time goes on, you collect these. And I finally got to the point. I'd always thought about writing a book, but I have so many activities and interests, I've never had the time. And then COVID came along. Last year, COVID shut down all the travel. And I was sitting around one day and I thought, you know what? If I'm ever going to write a book, I need to go ahead and do it. And so I started just categorizing my thoughts, lessons learned and tips and things that made our company successful, and started writing the book, and it just flowed. And so if it hadn't been for COVID, probably never would have done it. So I'm glad that I did, knocked it out.
Well, the way to use your time effectively to do something very important and very creative, also, contributing value. So one of the things that strikes me, and by the way, thank you for that answer. Many of us that have been in the petrochemical, chemical refining businesses over the last 20, 30, 40 years, there's a sense of, I've learned a lot along the way, and I want to make sure that I give that back, that I help the industry not repeat some of the things that we've seen in the past. And I know, having read your book, that's a major theme. What would you say, though, Sam, is the core theme of the book from your perspective? And there's no right or wrong answer here, but you're the author, so you've got the best perspective.
Well, the title is The Power of Goal Zero, which I'll get into Goal Zero later on. But the subtitle really captures the theme. It's a results-driven approach to achieving excellence in performance. And as I evolved throughout my career, people would talk about, a lot of times would challenge each other. What's more important? Is it safety? Is it quality? Is it reliability? Is it cost management? Well, the answer is it's all of the above. You have to do them all. And so we crafted the term operational excellence through the years that says, hey, we're trying to achieve excellence in everything we do. And if you do that, you'll get safety and you'll get reliability and quality. And Vince Lombardi had a famous quote that I always remember. He would tell his players, he says, gentlemen, we're going to be in pursuit of perfection and we know that nothing's perfect, but if we keep driving for perfection, we'll hit excellence along the way. And he says, I'm not remotely interested in being just good. And I think companies need to be that way too. And it was always my philosophy when I was working is how can we be the very best at what we do? And in today's competitive environment, you have to be the best if you're going to win.
I love that theme. And I love the fact that, again, that you build upon that in the book where, every boat rises, right? Quality is improved, reliability is improved, safety is improved following this methodology. But you start with one core element, and that is leadership. So build upon that if you don't mind. Go down that path.
Sure. So taking operational excellence a step further, we created a formula for achieving operational excellence, and it takes 5 factors. One is leadership, one is people, one is culture, systems, and assets. In a manufacturing organization, you have to maintain your assets. So going to your point on leadership, what I do in the book, I break down each of those 5 categories, and I talk about lessons learned, tips that have improved performance in those different areas. And I try to outline those and give at least my learnings in a book. I've mentored a lot of young people throughout the years, and I tried to write it in a way that's a mentor, not only to brand new people just beginning their career, but on up to CEOs. So you asked about leadership. Leadership begins with integrity. Who you are, what are your values? Do you have the competence? Do you have courage in what you're doing? Do you have persistence? And do you communicate a vision of excellence that you want to achieve in the organization? And so that's just an example of one category, leadership. I don't pretend to be the expert in leadership, but I have led a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of really great leaders. And so I'm just sharing the things that I've seen that I think that work and will be helpful to others.
Well, I like to focus on leadership simply because George Pilko, our owner and founder, talks about there are 3 things important to risk management in our industry: leadership, leadership, and leadership. And your book does an outstanding job of knocking that concept out of the park. I mean, it really does begin and end with that. However, there's another key concept that you have in the book, Sam, that I have to touch on. And so a little bit of a story. You talk about operational excellence, and everything is driven through operational excellence. You also talk about management systems. Oftentimes, and I know this is true in Dow, and I suspect it's true in other major corporations, sometimes the management system can become so, let's call it driven, to where it leads you in the wrong place. You miss the mark of what you really are trying to accomplish. Your point, or one of the key points you make, is simplicity and making sure it's simple, it's understood, it manages the risks. So talk about that if you don't mind. You go down that path. And by the way, if you have examples that you want to share with us, please do.
Sure. People, especially technical people, tend to complicate things more than they should. And I'm a chemical engineer, and so I are one. But people can communicate things the way they think is important, but what's really important is how people receive it. And if things are too complicated, then people won't understand it, and they won't execute the way you want. I'll give you an example. When I went to Shell, I was already starting to frame in my mind that standards and procedures and work processes needed to be much simpler than you normally find in industry. And so at that time, we had in Shell it was called yellow guides. They were guidance documents, and they were all long, 70, 80 pages or so. And Shell we decided to start creating standards for the things we did rather than guidance documents. So the first one was a driving standard. And we had 20,000 trucks on the road every day. We had, business people driving cars and whatever. So I wanted a standard that focused on the basic things that it took to prevent accidents, car accidents. Well, I signed a team to it. They brought it back, and the first one was 56 pages. And so I looked at it and I said, well, who's going to read this? And who's going to remember it? And so I sent it back, and they brought it back a little shorter. And then finally, one of the guys said, Sam, I think I get it. You want the 10 Commandments, not the Bible. And I said, yeah, I guess that's right.
Yeah.
So eventually we ended up with a 2 or 3 page document that had the top requirements that we wanted everybody to know and understand and follow to improve driving safety. And guess what? Our driving record got better, and not just because of that, but a general theme of set clear expectations, keep it as simple as possible. You have to strictly prioritize, and then enforce it and make sure people fully comply.
I think, to me, that resonates completely. And it may be that you earn the right to get into more and more and more levels of complexity, but you start and you prioritize. You use that word, you prioritize, and you get the clear commandments, and you get things understood right off the bat. You're setting boundaries.
Let me say briefly, Greg, along that point. Nothing that we do in the industry is simple. Okay, so you don't pretend that it's simple. But if you think of a funnel that on this side, you've got a lot of details in what you do, but you have to bring it together in a simple way to communicate so people understand. And once they understand the concepts, then you can go to more detail again. That's the point you're making. You can't show them everything and expect people to understand and comprehend what's going on.
Right. Exactly right. Sam, one of the things that I love about your book is that you go into a lot of personal stories. Being honest, every one of your stories, when you started, it reminded me of my personal stories in my career. So I don't know if we're just back-to-back opposite, or we're so similar in nature that was true, but I think that's going to be true for anybody that reads the book. Talk to us about the value of your personal stories and why you included those in the book.
Well, I think when you read books and people say you need to do this or do that, there's no context behind it. And so and most rules and requirements in companies are there because serious injuries happened, explosions, customer problems. There's a reason behind it, but we don't always explain the reason. Yeah. And so in the book, for every theme, and I call them goal zero nuggets, there's probably 100 nuggets that I list throughout the book. There's a story behind it. And, I'll give you an example, another example.
Good.
When I was just starting work, I worked in research. Dow used to hire all the engineers in R&D, and we were doing pilot plant research for producing toluene diisocyanate. And we had some resident contractors that would build the pilot units that we were operating. So I designed one together with my leadership, and the contractor built it, and then we were operating it. And we were standing in the control room one day. Of course, I'm a 2 or 3 year person, lots of confidence. And I said something about the pilot plant that I built. And then he was standing there and he laughed. He said, Sam, I don't remember any pipe wrenches in your hand. He said, you didn't build that, I built it. And I thought about it and I said, you're right. I didn't build it. He built it, and I didn't even design it myself. I had help from my supervisors. And so I learned at that time, one of the goal zero nuggets is be real careful about saying I, or this is my pilot plant. You got to say we, and this is our success. And as a leader, if things go wrong, take accountability for it. Go ahead and say aye. But if there's successes, say this is what we did. This is what we accomplished. So, that's just an example of something I learned early on. And even today, I'll see people sometimes talking about, I did this and this is my department and my da da da. It doesn't sound good, so word of caution, don't be doing that.
Yeah, I think, again, just to harp on the book, I think you do a superb job of making sure everybody understands that nobody accomplishes anything by themselves. Nobody. Okay. It's a corporation, it's a team, it's a department. You talk a lot about strategy, though, and development of strategy and implementation of strategy. You want to go down that path and tell us more about that?
Well, you have to, I've coined the term plan and execute. Larry Bosti wrote a good book about execution, but I boil it down to say you need to plan. In other words, we try to do things on an annual basis, and I would use the fourth quarter always to look at our data, look at what our problems are, what are the opportunities, prioritize, and then get the plan. And then January 1st, hit the ground running to execute. And it never fails, something goes wrong or whatever, and then people want to fall back and start talking about what we need to do and replanning, regurgitating again. And it's not efficient, so plan and execute. So, you've got to have a strategy. You've got to have clear plans that people can understand, and then implement a cadence of reviews. I like to follow the plan, do, check, act cycle. You have a strategy, you've got your requirements, your work processes, then you execute, that's the do. And then you have to have a check process in there, measure, evaluate, investigate, and then act on the learnings. And then, update your plan again, update your strategy. So it's really a continuous improvement process.
You also talk about results, right? You talk about the output of that are very measurable results, and the results have to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's why I say it's the book is about a results-driven approach, and it takes results-driven leadership. I played a lot of football growing up, and there's a lot of things and soccer, I guess, would be the same way. You can spend all your time in the field passing the ball and running plays and whatever, but you have to score.
Right.
If you don't score, you don't win. And it's the same thing in business. You have to, you've got to score. And so you have to begin with the end in mind and say, okay, what does it take? What does success look like in our organization? And then what are the steps you got to take to get there? And so you have to stay focused. You have to get results. And I was very proud in my companies. Those of you that know about OSHA recordable rate, we were always continuously in the 0.2 injuries per 200,000 man hour range, which is world class. It's the top decile of the leading safest industry in the world. And so, but if you get safety, like I said earlier, you get everything else too. And so it's all about results and making sure that you're doing the right things in a processed way that achieves the results.
Yeah, I think you make the comment in your book about good safety being good business. I mean, it is one of the metrics that you have to have. It's the starting point, right, to make sure that everything else goes well. So one of the things I like about the book, Sam, is it really speaks to every level that's out there. So tell me about that, how you think you're speaking to every level, but also let's focus on, if you could, where would you introduce your book? Where's the starting point for somebody that needs to read your book?
Well, I began the book, I think, aimed at C-suite executives. That's where I spent the last 20 years of my career. CEOs and leaders of environment, health, and safety, and business leaders and manufacturing leaders. And as I wrote it, I began to realize there were things down in for younger people to gain. Definitely plant managers, but even new college graduates or new people into the organization.
Yep.
And so I think there's personal tips on how to be a good leader, how to lead people, how to influence behavior. We haven't really talked about goal zero, but goal zero is a culture of excellence, importance of management systems. And so the principles in the book can apply to a company with 100,000 people like Shell, or a small company. You know, the leadership is universal, and everybody has systems to some degree. You know, you just have to make sure they're not too complicated. And so what I ended up doing at the end was creating a roadmap for operational excellence. So after I went through the 5 categories, then I stepped back and I reevaluated how did we make progress through the years, and I tried to create a roadmap to help people get there. So in other words, if you don't have any system in place, you could start and follow that roadmap. But if you have a system, at least you could go through the roadmap and check and say, you know, where can I improve? And so I think to answer your question, it's a book for new people right on up to CEOs in companies, large business, small business, manufacturing, service companies. I've bounced it off a lot of friends and colleagues in different types of organizations, and that's why it's taken me longer to complete the book, because I wanted to make sure that it resonated with the audience. And so, you know, I think you know what I like to see: you buy the book for your people in your organization and say, look, here's a roadmap. A lot of organizations don't have the resources maybe to do some of the things they do, so they can hire a consulting firm, a Pilko or others out there, you know, to help put meat on the bones. And so it's really just a roadmap of a lot of tips and describing how you can go from where you are today to a better world.
Yeah, my question to you about where should you start, that was a setup question. I apologize for asking that. My thoughts, after reading the book, is it's got nuggets of wisdom all throughout the book. So the question really is, well, where does that wisdom deliver the most value? And you said it well. There's parts and pieces that deliver value for the brand new or the aspiring chemical engineer that's out there in college that wants to say, you know, what do I need to focus on? There's value there. To the early entry person, the mid-level manager, the C-suite manager, all the way to the board level, there are nuggets of wisdom that you've spread throughout the book that can plant seeds everywhere in terms of how to do it and do it right. You mentioned goal zero, and I was going to come back to that point. Talk to me about the title, what you're trying to convey, and I know you've used that in your organizational the way you've organized and delivered results for Dow, Shell, LyondellBasell, and others. Tell me about goal zero.
Well, we we developed the concept of goal zero when I was at Shell, and it took a while to get my head around it. But it's really it's a philosophy of zero. Instead of saying, you know, our reliability is this much today, and we want to improve each year. You know, you start to drive a concept of zero defects. It's not just continuous improvement, but zero defects. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to follow the guidance, you know, your best practices, your management system that you developed through the years of how to do what you do. You want zero non-compliance with that. If you focus on safety, you want zero unsafe acts. You know, so it starts to become a philosophy that gets ingrained in every person in your company. They know that, hey, we're a goal zero company. And I talk about in the book, goal zero can be an adjective or it can be a noun. You know, we're talking about a goal zero performance, a goal zero company, or we're trying to achieve goal zero. You know, so both ways. And it was always really neat for me to go around the world, and I'd see posters in all of our plants globally and in different languages, but goal zero would be right there. And we talk about the philosophy that goal zero begins with me, each person. You know, so goal zero, where that fits in the 5 elements for operational excellence, that helps set your culture. You know, so you've got to have the right culture in your company. Because, you know, people will say, well, you know, I mean, if you look at injuries, probably 90% come from some type of human behavior. It's either not following the rules, not doing a good risk analysis, not paying attention to detail. And so Goal Zero really works on that culture of perfection for every person on every job, every task.
So Sam, I'm going to come back to some of kind of the beginning of where we started, and then I'll ask you to kind of wrap us up. But it's about people. It's about caring for other people. It's about leading in a way that others recognize that it's more about them than it is anything else. In your background, you talk a lot about how you got to that level. You give your father a lot of credit in shaping who you are. Talk to us about, how did you develop your passion for people?
I guess at an early age, I mean, my wife says I talk too much. And so I enjoy being with people. I love meeting new people. And so at an early age, I played a lot of sports. I was in Boy Scouts, interacted, and I got into leadership positions pretty quickly. And so then you start to find out, well, how do you lead? You can command to everybody has to do this, or better, I've found that, hey, if people understand what you're trying to achieve and you act like a player coach and really work as a catalyst to make sure everyone's achieving the goal, you accomplish a lot more. And I guess I've kind of figured that out early. And then as I went through my career, once I started working, I got into leadership roles real fast, and not that I wanted to, but it just happened. And then as your scope of control increases over time, in the chemical business like I was in, you might have a project. Eventually, you have a section of a plant, and then you've got the whole plant that you're responsible for, and then it's a site, and then it's a global function or a whole bunch of sites. The philosophies are the same. And, so when I became head of environment, health, and safety, that's when I had more time to even focus on the philosophies behind behavior management and how to get large organizations of people, in my case, across different countries and different languages. How do you get them all focused and aligned and delivering to the best of their ability to achieve results for the company? And I found that always to be an exciting challenge. And to see the results at the end of the day, how your company performs, is tremendous. I mean, it's a great reward. And so that's just kind of the tips I tried to capture in the book. And, I believe it will be very helpful for anyone who reads it.
So again, one of the takeaways I had is it's personal. Everything about you is personal, whether it's corporate or whether it's, Boy Scouts or whether it's coaching or whether it's mentoring, it's always personal because it's about relationships and the way you have managed those things over time. That comes out loud and clear in the book. So thank you for that. So tell us, when is the book available and how does somebody get a hold of it?
Okay. So we're recording this May the 4th. I'm very close to having it finished and published. So we're going to target June the 1st as the go live date. I'm creating a website. You can go to samsmolik.com and where I'll describe the book, talk about some of the endorsements. I have a whole lot of endorsements, people that have looked at it. I'm going to include the introductory chapter. So it kind of gives a pretty good overview of the book. So, go to samsmolik.com and you'll find out how to order the book, how to pre-order. And one other thing, I don't normally ask for this, but if on Amazon, if you buy it, if you like the book, go in and put a comment in there for me, because that really helps. Amazon goes off those comments to promote the books that they're interested in. Yep. And so go to the website, and the book will come out soon. And also, I'd like to get feedback from anybody. If you never know, you might make another edition of it. So if some points aren't clear or you particularly like things, I'd like to hear from you.
Sam, thank you. I think as always, like I said at the very beginning, it's always a pleasure interacting with you. So thank you for that interview. Thank you also for the book. And for those of you that are interested, as Sam mentioned, you can find his book at his website. You can also contact Pilko and Associates at www.pilko.com, and we'll assist you in supporting you with that book as well. Sam, anything that you'd like to say in closing to the audience?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Greg. I think you're a great host. Yeah, you have another career after this one here, but
Hey,
thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it a lot.
My pleasure, and we look forward to the book coming out. If you have any questions about any of the information you heard today, as I mentioned earlier, don't hesitate to reach out to Pilko and Associates at www.pilko.com. We'll be happy to introduce you to Sam and or help you through whatever risk issues you're managing. Thanks, and we hope that everybody stays healthy during this COVID period. Have a great day.